Many moons ago, I ended up in one of those a change of career. I ended up in an internet support job, and it was a good one because it allowed me unlimited browsing, unrestricted browsing, or unlimited overtime. And it was one of those jobs where you don't even have to change the screen to take the next call because it says, "Did you reboot the computer?" It's the same thing again and again and again. But with unlimited overtime, I was allowed to stay on alternating weeks, like 12 hours a day, and I can browse anywhere I want to. So very quickly, this is around Y2K and thereabouts, I found myself on Talk.Origins. And there were other people posting there you may know, people like Richard Carrier and P.Z. Myers and other such people. And I found myself discovering a whole lot of things because I as you do when you're playing around on the internet, you find weirdos. And I was really surprised that people believed the incredible, crazy things that they do. And so I found myself in Talk.Origins where I could pose a question. And I would be able to see how the professional scientists answer that question. I would see how the professional theologians answer that question. And they can both see each other's answers, which I thought was a great way to see this compared. And then people would tell me, well, you need to read this resource or that resource, where I would just take it on my own initiative to read this or that. And so I did this for years and years. I was on a perpetual learning curve. So I got basically a college degree out of just sitting on the internet all day, every day, until I finally went into a college going for an MCSE degree, and I went into the wrong building. I walked into the science building by accident, and I happened to cross a fossil display, and I remember stopping and looking at the fossils, and I recognized every one of them, and I didn't just know what they were, I knew what the controversies were. I knew the scientists who discovered them. And as I'm looking at all these, I'm thinking, why do I know all of this, and I'm never going to use it? So I went in for a geoscience major instead of MCSE. Screw the MCSE degree. But as you can imagine, I'm talking to these people, and I'm finding out all these wacky beliefs, and it just kept getting worse. I mean, some people were bragging that their church had positioned senators or judges for the next wave in what would later be revealed to be the wedge strategy, because they wanted to take over the United States. This is one of the believers explaining to me how they want to take over the United States by undermining science first. So if you can cause all of the school students to question science, then they'll be more easily deceived into believing, religion. So I started seeing what the Texas Board of Education was doing toward that end. And my wife arranged a moderated public debate between me and a couple of evangelical ministers who were courting the Board of Education, and two of the moderators were on the Board of Education. And I had elected to have 3 moderators on my side, 3 moderators on his side. He chose 2 people from the Board of Education and another minister. I chose 3 professional scientists who were all Christian, because I didn't want that argument. This is going to be on the science, not the theology. So I got my own genetics instructor who was featured in Nature for her contribution to the Human Genome Project. I got at that time, a famous geologist named Dr. Glenn Morton, who had written a wonderful article on Morton's Demon. He was originally a young Earth creationist author for Creation Science Quarterly, and then he realized, working in petrogeology, this is all nonsense. So he started writing from for different perspective. Still Christian. And then Dr. Robert T. Bacher, who was one of the advisors for Jurassic Park. He looks like a grizzled old prospector, but he has 2 Ivy League science degrees. So I had these people on, and I start this debate, and the first problem we had was that we wanted to set up definitions. I just want to make it easy so we don't have to argue back and forth over what every word means, because that's every argument, right? Because evolution always somehow turns into something coming from nothing, or one kind giving birth to a completely different kind that isn't related to its parents, something like that. So I suggested these definitions, and he refused. He refused to participate if I put up definitions. He said, let's just leave these words undefined and let the audience decide what they think these words should mean. And this told me that he knows that this is a shell game, that this is a scam. In my first post, I thought that I had effectively won the debate right there. But what I didn't realize was that none of my moderators were going to look at the science. Religion was all that took over. So one of his moderators told all of mine that they were not true Christians. And immediately the moderators are having a war with each other. Robert T. Bacher used my forum at my invitation to grandstand his hatred of atheists. at my invitation. So did Glenn Morton. He was passing messages to the opposition, trying to help them win, because, he said, he didn't want an atheist to beat a Christian in a debate. It didn't matter who's right or wrong. It doesn't matter that education is at stake. All that matters was the belief. So it degenerated immediately, and unfortunately, there's not even a remnant of that debate still online. It was hosted by one of the sites that just up and disappeared when the rest of the .coms collapsed. But by this point, I had become an activist. And I realized that I'm having the same arguments with everybody all the time, every day. I mean, really, you're going to tell me there's no transitional species? I'm not even going to write a new thing. I'm just going to cut and paste what I wrote to the last guy. Wait, that last guy was you. So I realized, it comes down to just a little more than a dozen different arguments that you keep seeing repeated again and again and again and again. So I thought, why not just, instead of cutting and pasting these paragraphs that nobody reads, why don't I tailor something to people with, short attention spans? And so I did. I came up with the Foundational Falsehoods of Creationism video series on YouTube. Now, this was at a challenge. I was giving some girl a ride on my bike, and we stopped in some ice cream place at one point, and I was wearing a Darwin Fish t-shirt, and she found that objectionable. She said, "You can't prove evolutionism." And I said, "Well, just the fact that you called it that already indicates the problem." And I said, "But yes, I can. I can prove evolution." And she goes, "You can't prove evolution because that means you'd have to disprove God." And I said, "Whether God exists or not is irrelevant." And she staggered backwards at that. And I said, "Okay, I can't prove." She said, "Prove it then. Prove evolution." I said, "Well, I can't do it standing here in the parking lot of a Dairy Queen, but if you give me some time, I'll gather all the data and put it in a presentation that will make sense to you, and I will effectively prove the case by that point." And so I did. I made the video series. And I remember sending her the first 4 all at once. And the response was that I was hurting people. I can understand being embarrassed at finding out that you're wrong about something. But why would you want to keep believing something after you know it's not true? But I've had so many people tell me that they don't care what the facts are. I mean, I've seen ministers on stage giving, in their own congregations, giving a sermon that they don't care that they're delusional. It doesn't matter what the facts are. I just want to believe what I want to believe. So, the Foundational Falsehoods of Creationism, I went on and continued the series, and that got a lot of attention, and which really only just fired me on. The more I do it, more it seems that I can do. Eventually, people like Dave here had me on to be Texas State Director of American Atheists, something I enjoy that title. And I was just mentioned on Australian news, apparently today, when Ken Ham, originally from Brisbane, Australia, made a comment, and some Australian reporters picked it up, that he wanted his congregation to pray for me to open my heart to the truth of God's Word. And I'm a little confused at being, opened up to the truth of something we've already proven cannot possibly be true, and certainly is not true. Truth is defined as that which is concordant with reality, and what part of Noah's Ark is concordant with reality, right? No part of that. Ken and I had some history. It seems that he saw a video that my wife made, and he made a video against her. Now remember, how popular is Ken Ham? I mean, he is the kingpin of pseudoscience mythology for the entire world. Every other pseudoscience, non-science, anti-science organization is either connected with Answers in Genesis or uses them as a resource. All of them, including the Muslims one, like Harun Yahya. So he's a big deal. And he's made a video criticizing my wife because she believes something so silly that we came from apes. All right. So we did a counter protest. He was, to give you an idea how bad this was, we've testified to the Board of Education just to have our testimonies ignored. I have personally explained to the Board of Education several things that they're teaching that are just factually wrong. Things about evolution, things also about history. Because they're not just trying to distort science, but also sex and social studies. So I can't go in, we didn't talk about the sex issue directly to the board, but we did address also the history, where they wanted to paint Noah's Ark as a historic event and Moses as an inspiration for the Constitution, that basically he's one of the founding fathers. They depict him they've changed social studies textbooks so that this became a Christian nation, that we were founded on Christian values. This is in the science or the history textbooks, right, in Texas, that are indicating that somehow by these connections that, the founding fathers were all inspired by Christian teachings and so forth, and that Moses was a real person who was born in 1250 BC. When most scholars can't agree on when he would have lived, and many insist that he never lived at all. Okay, so Ken does this attack on my wife, and it turns out that he is the keynote speaker for the Texas Homeschool Coalition. He's the keynote. Him, young earth creationists, this is what we're treating our kids, right? They take them out of school so that they don't have to learn forbidden knowledge, and then they listen to this snake oil salesman deceive them. So we protest that, and the way that we protested was my wife and I both did a presentation with a few other people at the Houston Museum of Natural Science, wherein I gave a lesson on all of the things that we're supposed to be taught according to the standards, what we're supposed to be taught in Texas. And I addressed the Texas audience after I go through this list. And I said, because all of you guys are Texas students, you've all learned all this, right? Of course, nobody did, because the schools don't touch it. So that's one of the things that my wife do on our channel. We actually are covering these. We do a science series for educating for biology at the middle school and high school level, where we include evolution everywhere that we're covering all the standards that you're supposed to. But whenever evolution should be mentioned, I guarantee it is. Whenever it's relevant to do so. So we did this thing against Ken Ham. Proving that wisdom teeth, among other things, are indicators of, or that are evolution, that are indicating our ape ancestry and so forth, and I'm not going to go into that now. But we also challenged him to a debate. There was a atheist group in Houston, Texas, about 2,200 members at that time, and they challenged Ken Ham to debate a representative of their group, me. And Ham refused. He would only debate a PhD. Yeah. So P.Z. Myers threw his PhD in and says, I'll do it. One condition. R.N. Ross stays as my partner. No further communication. Sadly, Ken Ham found a replacement for me. Some guy named Nye. Just a few months later, they had their debate, and it wasn't under the terms that I was going to do. Because one of the reasons that he turned me down was that I insisted that neither Ken nor I make any money on the debate. That it had to be in a neutral location, the museum in Houston, the Natural History Museum. But of course, when Bill Nye signed on, they did it at Answers in Genesis, where they could earn $20,000 just from the ticket sales for seats to get in. To say nothing of the fact that he had so many people who were so upset when Ken Ham clearly lost that debate. I mean, full cred to Bill Nye. He is the science guy, and that is, Ken Ham. I mean, even CNN was laughing at him to his face when they had them both on. But he got a lot of pity from people that are really desperate to convince a whole lot of people about things we know for absolutely certain are not true. And so they donated millions because he lost. But ultimately, because he had that debate with Bill Nye, is the reason that ridiculous Ark stands now. And it couldn't have stood if it had been built by Noah, because, of course, we know that he didn't have metal braces or steel screws or cranes or trucks or power tools. Good point. Or hundreds of trained shipwrights and all of that. That, Noah was a 600-year-old man with 3 untrained laborers using only primitive tools from the Stone Age? Really? Really? Yeah. There's so much wrong with that, but I'm not going to get into it. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to say thank you.
Yes, I understand that my whole life is just a blink of an eye. The history of the earth is with each moment that goes by. But this moment that I'm with you, it feels like time has stood still. It feels somehow like it matters, and that it always will. Thank you so much.